What's going on, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into another edition of Final Whistle. As always, I'm your host, Blaine Spencer. I have a returning guest with me today. I have Steve Hiegel. He covers college basketball, college football, college lacrosse. And if you just want to go check out his stuff, just college football, justcollegebasketball.com, etc., etc. Steve, thanks for coming on again to come on Final Whistle and chat it up with me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And if I know last week we tried something different, so we did two interviews along with doing content there. So please tune in, check those out. We'll see how those turn out. And we're going to go back to a little bit of traditional setup this week with your Tuesday and Friday episodes with a couple interviews in between. So there was some breaking news that happened this past weekend. The College Basketball Committee released their top 16 seeds for the NCAA tournament. I'm going to rally them off real quick. We have Gonzaga as the overall number one, which was pretty presumptuous in itself. Baylor 2, Michigan 3, and Ohio State 4 on the 1 line. Then we have on the 2 line Illinois, Villanova, Alabama, Houston. Then Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, Oklahoma on the 3 line. Then for the 4 line, Iowa, Texas Tech, Texas, and Missouri. Steve, I want to get your overall take what the committee dropped this weekend. Did they get the top 16 teams correct?
I think they got them very close to being correct, but they were one off, in my opinion. I think Florida State definitely deserved to be in that top 16. Probably at this point, it would have been released on Saturday. So before they beat Virginia last night, would have said them being on the 4 line. Now I think they could have even moved up to the 3 line as of today if it was released today. But I definitely think Florida State belongs in that top 16 of teams. I know they've had a couple COVID pauses, so they've had less games played than some other teams, but I definitely think they deserve to be in the top 16 regardless.
Yeah, I actually agree. That was the team I was going to add in. I don't think they were took into account that they were going to smack Virginia around last night, though, either. So who would the team that who would you kick out? Would it be Missouri, Texas, or Texas Tech out of those three?
I would say probably Missouri. I think they're a solid team. I don't think they're top 4 seed worthy in the NCAA tournament. Looking at their body of work and who they've beaten so far this season, we'll see how they continue to play down the stretch in the SEC and see how they do in the SEC tournament. But yeah, as of right now, I would Missouri would be the team I would kick out.
Yeah, I think that would be I would be in perfectly agree with that one, especially with they're limping in right now. Especially too, they've lost I think 2 out of their last 3. Lost to Arkansas this past weekend in overtime. That was before the committee released their rankings, of course. But I think Missouri is definitely the team that's limping in, and Florida State's the team that's surging. So I think I agree in that they need to be the ones dropped out. So out of this weekend, there were a lot of big games that happened. What was the game that you really were like locked in on, and that really you were taken away by?
I'd have to say probably the Gonzaga game against San Francisco, just because I thought it would be a much closer game than it turned out to be. Probably not a traditionalist pick for game of the week, but I thought it would be a much better game. Of course, you have no home crowd advantage for San Francisco playing Gonzaga like they normally would have had, but they got Gonzaga beat them up pretty good. So I was very surprised at how badly Gonzaga beat them. So.
Yeah, I think people really forget that San Francisco beat Virginia at the beginning of the year. I
Correct.
I think people forget that they beat a team that's in the top 10. Well, currently in the top 10. Virginia will probably drop out after this week, but still, San Francisco, the Dons, they're an average team, but they showcase the ability to be very competitive in the WCC. And Gonzaga beating them by 39 was definitely an eye opener. But for me, it's got to be Oklahoma going on the road in Morgantown, somehow pulling out that victory, 91-90 over West Virginia. Austin Reeves, he's been an absolute star in the making this year for Oklahoma. I think this is Lon Kruger's best coaching job that he's been able to pull off this season. Being able to beat West Virginia, they've beaten Texas Tech, they've beaten Kansas, they've beaten Texas. Like Alabama too. They beat Alabama in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Just what he's been able to do. And they beat Alabama with Reeves was out because of COVID, all that as other things that were happening. I think Oklahoma has been really the team that surprised me the most. I don't think they're really getting enough credit that people are really giving them. They're still lingering around the top 10. I think they're a top 6 team at the moment, in my opinion. What do you think about the Sooners?
Yeah, they've had a really impressive season. I never thought I thought going into that Alabama game they would, and when were short a few players, I figured they'll probably lose this game, and they won that game. The big win against West Virginia in Morgantown. I know, albeit there's no crowd there like there normally would be, but still, that's still a huge win on the road against a top, 16 team that is in the, is one of the seeded teams the committee picked as of Saturday. We'll see. I mean, see how they can do down the stretch run the Big 12. It's a brutal conference. There's very few gimmies this year. I know Kansas is slightly down this year. And of course, Iowa State's having a bad year, and Kansas State not as well either. But most of the rest of the teams in the conference are going to be hard teams to beat on a night in, night out basis.
Yeah,
So
and
we'll see.
they have Texas this week too on Wednesday. I think Wednesday night they've got Texas. It's at home, but limited fans in Oklahoma or no fans depending on the COVID situation there. What do you expect to see in that matchup? What is going to be the biggest takeaway that you would look forward to in that game?
I think it probably would be for that game particularly. It would have to be to see how well Texas's guards can play. I saw Texas play a couple times this year, and it seems like their guard play has really determined how well they've done in games. Early in the season, like I said, I saw them play well in that Maui Invitational and beat North Carolina, who's not having as great of a season as we would have thought in the Maui Invitational final, and they've done very well in the Big 12. I mean, much better than even I thought they would do. So I think the guards play is going to determine the outcome of that game come Wednesday. So in Oklahoma, against Oklahoma.
Yeah, I agree there with wholeheartedly. Texas has been very inconsistent with their guard play, which I think they may still end up winning the game, but it keeps those teams that they're substantially better than, like a Kansas State, and keeps them in games more often than not, which has been, I think, Texas's Achilles heel. And I think for Oklahoma, it's been their whole season. It's been a by committee approach. They don't know who it's going to be every night. I mean, you can assume Reeves will get his 15 to 18, but then there's always that second score that you don't really expect. So it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be that second guy for Oklahoma. That's always been the takeaway for me.
People forget too, Brady Manick, who has been around, seems like forever because he played back when Trae Young.
Yeah, right.
Several years ago. It feels like he's been there a lifetime, but he's had some very good games this season and continues to be the X factor for the Sooners as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I saw that you were talking about Loyola Chicago and Drake, the two MVC teams. They played a back-to-back this weekend. It was a split over at Drake for both games. What are your take on the Missouri Valley Conference as well as the non-Power Fives as a whole? Is there any team that could really make a run? And will Drake and Loyola both get in, or do you think it's only going to be one team getting that bid?
I think they'll both get in. I think that Drake win on Sunday, after Loyola Chicago blew them out on Saturday, really helped their cause. I think whoever wins the Missouri Valley Conference tournament will get in, of course, as automatic bid. And the other team, I think, will get in as well, as long as they don't slip up maybe like in the first round of the tournament. At least if the other team doesn't win the tournament, gets to the semifinals. The conference in a whole is very impressive. I mean, you saw last year, Evansville fell apart, but they beat Kentucky with Walter McCarty after the team fell apart after that, and Walter McCarty was let go as coach. But I mean, you see how well that conference is year in and year out. And usually the team that makes it to the tournament, if only one makes it, which is usually the case, does some damage in the tournament. And usually that 12-5, 6-11 type game. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a team that plays either of those teams come tournament time if they both do make it to the NCAA tournament. And I think Loyola Chicago's got that experience factor. Cam Crutwig's in the middle. I mean, he played on that Final Four team. Porter Moser has the experience as well as the head coach taking that team to the Final Four. So, and Drake, look how well they've done this year. I think Saturday was the first game was more an aberration. They got beat really badly, of course, but as you saw Sunday, those teams are pretty evenly matched. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the tournament championship game and they play a third time in a couple weeks.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think Saturday was more of a wake-up call to them. Hey, like, we can't really like coast through what we've been doing really and be able to contend with these guys. Like, we got to actually play both ends how we've been playing all year. I think Loyola kind of gave them a little reminder, hey, we're kind of still the top dogs here, whether you like it or not. We may not be and statistically, these guys are better than what this Final Four team was going into the tournament, which is really surprising for me. And for me personally, to make it easier, I think Drake will have to win the MVC it'll make that easier because I think Loyola is more of a lock than Drake is at the moment.
I agree. I agree.
So I
Yeah.
think for both teams to make it easier for both teams to get in, Drake would have to win the tournament, and then Loyola would get that. But I agree, they're going to be a tough. They'll probably both be 12 or 13 seeds at 5, 12, 4, 13 matchup that you always get the upsets. Don't be surprised if those two are definitely the ones that are going to be moving on in that first round game.
As for you asked me about an outsider team, I don't have a mid-major on the top of my head, but a team that's really impressed me this year that's always seemed like they've had a lot of talent but never put it all together is USC. And this seems like the finally the year they're putting it all together. They're doing really well in the Pac-12, and with the record overall, I think this may be finally the year that the team has put it all together and they can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. I mean, we'll see. It all depends on, of course, their seeding when they get into the tournament and who they're matched up against. But they have a lot of talent on that team. They have every season. I think this is finally the year. It looks like everything is going to click for them.
Yeah, 17-3 right now, the Trojans. I mean, they did play a bunch of gimmies to start the year, so I think that's what really the conference has really been hindered by, especially with their seat rankings. With them, I think they're only around 18 or 19 in the polls right now, so with only 3 losses, which is saying something. But I think I agree. The Trojans definitely have the capability this year to be a surprise team. I do like that one a lot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do come tournament time because I think they got a deep run in them if they can put it all together like they have been doing.
Yeah, and one team that I think has finally figured it out is Creighton, especially after what they did to Villanova this past weekend, beating them handily by 15, 16 points. It was in Omaha, which always helps. Creighton's got a lethal home record, but still, I think Zagorowski's finally taken on the criticism and being the first team All-American, the Big East preseason player of the year. I think that's finally accumulated to him to step up. Mitch Ballack can pull up from 35 all over the court, which is kind of scary. I think what's more scary about Ballack is that he's more of a passer before he actually shoots the ball, and he shoots over 50% from the 3-point line on occasions in most games. So what do you think of the Blue Jays and the Big East Conference as a whole?
I think the Blue Jays have an excellent chance of making a deep run in the tournament as well. The conference, I think, is kind of like, I think, split into like you got the top tier and then the second tier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of how the conference hasn't been that way as much in the past, but this year I think it definitely is that way. I think you got Villanova on the top tier line, Creighton on the top tier line. I think St. John's is on the top tier line. They saw them beat Villanova several weeks ago. And then you have some of the other teams like the Georgetowns are down below in the second tier line. I mean, they've been hit hard by transfers and players getting kicked off the team like that happened last season. So they've almost used this year as a rebuilding year, just to use them as an example. But I definitely think, the Big East can get 4 or 5 bids. We'll see what happens come the middle of March when the selection committee makes the decisions.
Yeah, I think right now it's Xavier. I'm trying to go off the top of my head. Xavier, UConn's on the bubble. Seton Hall's on the bubble. And then I think you have Creighton and Villanova that are locks. And then Xavier's on the bubble right there too. Then you have like 2 or 3 teams that are like in the back of the pack. It'll be interesting to see how many they get in, especially as I'm a Seton Hall guy. So I had to ask the question. I'm always intrigued to see what everyone thinks about Seton Hall, but I think Bryce Aiken, being he injured, didn't play this past weekend, and we played awful, and we somehow still beat Marquette. So I'll take it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen Seton Hall play that much this year. That's one of the teams that there's like a handful of teams like I really feel bad for last year because I think last year was a year they
we could have done a lot of damage.
Talent they had on that team, and they seemed like they were coming together and playing well at the right time, right at the end of the season, going into the Big East tournament. So, with Miles Powell and the rest of the players they had on that team, so that's one of those.
And now Powell's killing the G League by taking it by storm right now.
Yeah, that's one of those teams I feel for after last season. But as for the tournament, I think they're like right now they're on the bubble. They're kind of 50-50. It's all going to depend on how they play down the stretch in the last couple weeks.
Without a doubt. So Steve, before the last time you were on, we talked about the gap between Gonzaga and then everybody else. Baylor was still the number 2 team at that time. And in my opinion, I think Baylor substantially closed that gap more than people really thought they would. We thought it was going to be Gonzaga, then there was going to be everybody else. I think it's become Gonzaga, then there's Baylor, then there's everybody else. I think the gap between Baylor and everyone else is larger now than what Gonzaga and Baylor are. What's your take on that?
I agree completely. I think Gonzaga did have a gigantic gap between them and Baylor, and of course even more so than with the rest of the field. Like a month ago, but now I think it's definitely been minimized with Baylor. I would have thought Baylor would have lost by now, at least one game, and they haven't. And they played really well. And now, of course, they're on the COVID pause. But as you'll see,
Second
I put
time
on
too.
yeah, second time. As I put on Twitter, it'd be interesting to see the game on Sunday between Michigan and Ohio State because they're the number 3 and 4 teams and they're playing each other. I know we're not going to probably see Baylor Gonzaga this year, but we'll see that game in the Big Ten, and that's gonna determine a lot in the Big Ten race to see who wins that Big Ten championship, whether regular season or come tournament time. It's going to be interesting to see how those two teams go at each other Sunday and see who wins that game and kind of who determines themselves as the top team in the Big Ten. So.
Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
still think Illinois is right there as well with those two teams. Illinois would have played Michigan this past week, I believe, and the game got postponed because of COVID. So I don't know if they'll make the game up or not, but it should be very interesting to see what happens in that Michigan Ohio State game on Sunday.
Yeah, how impressed were you that Michigan was able to come off of the 3 weeks and they were down big early and still was able to rally on the road at Wisconsin to come out on top in that one?
Yeah, that was a very impressive victory. I believe they only have that one loss to Minnesota, where they just kind of
Minnesota romped them. That was more of that was such a revenge game though after Michigan blew them out.
Yeah, it looked like they just came out flat that day and just got punched in the mouth like boxing, annotation. Yeah. They just never could come back. But I think Michigan's definitely we'll see on Sunday how they play against Ohio State. I think Michigan's definitely the best team in the Big Ten. And it's gonna, we'll see the determining factor on Sunday if they can win against Ohio State, and then if they do get to make up that game against Illinois sometime in the next couple weeks before the Big Ten tournament, which I believe, quote me if I'm wrong, the Big Ten tournament I thought I read was taking place a week earlier than some of the other conference tournaments this year.
Yeah, I read something about that too. I think they're going to try and do it early. I don't think they're going to make up the games. I think they're just going to go based off percentage is what I've been reading. Just because they want to try and I think because they do it in Indianapolis too. Usually their Big Ten tournament. So I think because it's going to be in Indianapolis again, I think they want to be able to prepare for the NCAA tournament because everything's going to be in the Indianapolis area. I think
that makes sense.
Got moved up. So
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a great game though. It's on Sunday, I believe, at the Shoe at Ohio State. So it'll be interesting.
Nationally televised game on CBS at 1:00. So that should be a very good game.
Yeah. Without a doubt. So last thing I want to ask you real quick about on the college basketball ranks, who is the team that has really been for you the biggest disappointment?
I hate to take a shot, but I'd have to say Duke with all the talent they have.
And Jalen Johnson just opted out. You basically just quit on. All right, did he opt out or did he quit on his team?
I mean, you hate to say he quit on the team.
It's 3 weeks to go. There's only 3 weeks left.
Yeah, there's only a couple weeks left in the season. It almost makes me think that he's A, scared of getting injured, or B, just basically quitting. It's one of the two. Like he's kind of like in between. He's kind of like scared of maybe he's got like a slight injury now and he doesn't want to, get a catastrophic injury and be out for like the next year if he gets drafted later this year by the NBA and the season starts in the fall of 2021. So you can either look at it that way or look at it he just flat out quit. And it's a bad look, in the middle of February, on President's Day when you announce February 15th that you're going to opt out the rest of the season when there's probably only 5-6 games left for Duke, and then you have the ACC tournament, and they probably won't be in it very long the way they look right now. So, they're the most disappointing just because of all the talent with the freshmen. I understand they're all, freshmen, but still, they had a few returning players as well. They should have been much better than they are, and they seem like half the team is like Jalen Johnson. If he did quit, is like uninterested in playing. It's kind of just like, going out there and going through the motions. That's just my 2 cents. But
yeah, I was reading something by Jeff Goodman earlier this one after he opted out, saying that they were having him and his reps were having a huge disagreement early on in the year with Duke at the beginning. And then it was just starting to accumulate, and they were never really on the same page. I don't know if that's true. I feel like I think it's a little bit of a combination of the two as well. He doesn't want to get hurt before declaring, he's going to be he'll be a lottery pick guaranteed based off of his ability. So I think it's a little bit of both. I don't know if he's quitting. I think he just actually, I do think he's quitting, honestly. But I think it's because he just realizes that Duke's season's over. and he realizes that I just don't want to get injured anymore. I don't want to put my future in jeopardy. I think that's a huge part. And Krzyzewski, he came out saying that we shouldn't play earlier on in the year. Do you think that really didn't help Duke throughout the season? That was always accumulating in their mind because the women ended up opting out in December anyway. Do you think that was always in the back of their minds that Duke was just going to shut down the program entirely?
I think it was. I think that had something to do with his decision, of course. I think that goes back to the players only being probably like half invested this season, because after the women's team opted out and they're not having a good season, they're losing. They're probably like every game they go out there like kind of like the attitude of like, let's play, but let's just get this over with. You just can't wait for the season to end. They're not going to, even if they don't make the NCAA tournament, I really would be shocked if they accepted a bid to NIT if there's an NIT this year. So the prime example, though, you look at last year, too, add this one with Zion Williams, and he got hurt in the North Carolina game, and there was like, 5 or 6 games. And you figure he could have opted out, the rest of the season easily because he was going to be the number one pick. It was already decided, and he chose to grind it out and rehab for a couple weeks and come back for the ACC tournament and then their NCAA tournament run. That wasn't last year, the year before. But the point is, it's the same instance where he could have opted out then. He was definitely going to be the number one pick. He had proven, he was probably still going to be the player of the year at that point, and he still came back in time for the NCAA tournament and try to get them to win the national championship. So,
yeah, without a doubt. And do you think that this transition of players just opting out considerably more and more and trying to either go play overseas, play NBA ball, or play in the G League now, do you think you're going to see more and more recruits start to transition to that stage? Or do you think it's going to be only usually it'll be occasionally the top recruits that'll do that?
I think it'll be occasionally, because I think you'll see a big switch once the COVID pandemic ends. And I think a big factor in this all too is like, it's a much different experience if you sign up to play for Duke and you're going to be playing in front of 8,000 screaming fans in Cameron Indoor night in and night out, and then on the road games in the ACC in tough atmospheres. I think that energy just drives you so much more. And the fact you're playing in an empty gym with just some coaches and referees, and it's very difficult, I'm sure, for the players, and they got to be quarantined and they got to get daily testing. And there's so many other factors, but I think you'll still see a few players each season opt for the G League or to play overseas. But I think for the majority, they're still going to go to college, and play even if they don't want to play for a national powerhouse like, Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky, or they want to play for a mid-major, whoever they want to play for. I think they're still going to choose to go to college.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of that has to do with just being able to have the college experience more
Agreed.
too. Having that experience, even though it's just going to potentially be for a year. But I think just having that experience is going to be great for the kids and great for the universities as a whole. Being able to have those guys, even though it is for the one and done, is pretty much become the new norm in college basketball. So
I agree.
yeah, absolutely. So I want to throw out a quick question, just real quick. FCS football started this past weekend. I know there was only one game, but then they're going to start up more and more in the coming weeks. What is your takeaway that how this season's going to play out? Is it going to be very similar to the FBS season with a lot of cancellations or postponements, and then you're just going to be based off, all right, the 16 or 32 teams that gets in for the FCS playoffs is just going to be based off of your record or by a committee, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty much the same the way the FBS season, because you still have the pandemic to worry about and cancellations and postponements. I think it'll be probably based off winning percentage, depending on how many games each team plays. And I think, I think you'll see some teams actually, if they start having a lot of breaks and COVID pauses, just shut down, and then just shut it down for the fall. Because then they'll probably be able to have a full season in the fall. So I know they feel like they owe it to the players to have some kind of a season because they couldn't have one last fall, but I think that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's going to be a huge hindrance to see how much more cancellations you're going to see, because you're going to have so many more schools with the lack of testing and the lack of having tests. So how much more conservative are they going to be than trying to get, like Alabama, when Saban tested positive, let's get him his 3 tests, and then he tested negative 3 times, he can be back on the field. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the access of tests, being able to see how conservative your policy is going to be. That'll be interesting to see as well.
Yeah, and it's the expensive how expensive it is to have the tests on a daily basis for all these players. I mean, you see one thing with basketball, it's only 20, 25 people, including coaches, staff, and all the players. Where football, it's probably 100 people, if not more. They got to
Yeah.
get tested several times a week to play a game just on Saturdays, and then of course you got the travel thrown in and hotels and everything else. So, I think you're going to have the same outlook as college football in the fall, where you're going to have a lot of postponements and cancellations on a weekly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but Steve, before I let you go, I want to transition to a little bit of lacrosse here. I know you cover more college lacrosse, but still, Chris Hogan, the former Patriots wide receiver, Super Bowl champion, came out this weekend, said that he was going to and get into the Premier League Lacrosse League, the Premier Lacrosse League. Sorry, I totally worded that wrong, but it's okay.
Okay.
The Premier Lacrosse League. He's going to go into the draft. He was an outstanding lacrosse player back at Penn State. So what do you think the aspirations for him is? Will he get drafted? Do you think the team will give him a shot? What is your overall takeaway from this, from him transitioning now from the NFL to lacrosse?
I think he'll definitely get drafted, and he'll definitely get a shot with the team that drafts him. He's 32 years old, I believe. So
Yeah,
he's
around there.
yeah, he's probably got a couple good years left in him. I know he's taken a beating through playing in the NFL for the last decade, but I mean, he's a great athlete. Just showing him he played for the Patriots and won, I think, two of the Super Bowls he was on, maybe three. So definitely a two. With playing wide receiver in that offense with Tom Brady, and Gronkowski and Julian Edelman. And I think he'll definitely get drafted. He'll definitely be given a chance. I think he makes it. I don't think he's going to be the MVP of the league or anything, but I think he'll definitely have a 2 to 5 year career run as a lacrosse player. And I think he'll be a solid player for whoever takes him in the draft.
Yeah, I know you talked about earlier before we started that he played at Penn State. What is his potential going to be? Is it just going to be more of a starter and or come a guy off the bench? What do you think his role will probably be?
I think it'll be more or less like a role player. He'll have a defined role that he'll fill out for the team. It's kind of, yeah, at his age and with how much he's been through in terms of playing in the NFL. I'm sure playing in the NFL for as long as he did feels like 3 lifetimes for, because some players, the average NFL career only lasts like 2.5 years now. So, I think at his age, he's going to have a defined role for the team that he drafts him, and and he'll make it probably for 2 to 5 years. If he can find the right role, maybe he'll make it longer. And it all depends. It seems like a lot of times these days you'll see basketball, lacrosse more than anything else. It's just the right fit. The team that drafts you. You can make. I think the NBA is the biggest factor in that. The fact that if you get drafted in the NBA on the right team, you can have a 10 to 15 year career. Sometimes guys get drafted on the wrong team. They don't have a fit and they can never find their fit and they last 3 to 5 years and they flame out. I think the best example of that I can remember recently was Danny Green, played in North Carolina. I mean, he was probably the 3rd or 4th best player on that team 12 years ago, 2009, 12 years ago when they won the national championship. And look, he's still playing in the NBA. The rest of those guys are pretty much all played on that team that won the national championship are all not playing in the NBA anymore.
And so he's a back-to-back national NBA champion too.
Hey, he won those championships with the Spurs. Yeah, and then he went to the the Raptors with Kawhi, and then he went to the Lakers
last year with the Lakers in the bubble.
Yeah, and I don't know who's on what team he's on now. I lost track.
He's on the Sixers now. Sixers.
Okay, Sixers. So he's got another chance.
He's trying to go for 3 chips and on 3 different teams.
That might be a record. Yeah, but it's so versatile of a player. I mean, he can block shots, he can rebound, he can shoot threes, and I think he found that right fit. And San Antonio, I mean, he was the perfect fit for that team. He filled that role perfectly on that team. They had Tim Duncan, they had others, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, other stars then, and that was the perfect fit.
Yeah, just had to be that 4th or 5th scorer. Just hit the shot when you were open.
Yep, that's all. I mean, and that's kind of. I'm sorry to backtrack, but that goes back to like Chris Hogan. If he can get on a team that drafts him, or even if it doesn't work out, if he gets traded to or released and goes signs with somebody else, he needs to find that team he can find that perfect fit with. And if he does, he can last in the league a long time. So,
yeah, it will definitely be something intriguing to look out for to see if he can make it in the Premier Lacrosse League.
I wish him the best of luck. Yeah, I mean
absolutely
be a great story. So,
without a doubt.
A couple of years ago with college basketball, just to leave you one, it was he played for Loyola men's lacrosse, and then he went to Northwestern, Pat Spencer, and he played his senior year. It was his grad transfer year, and he played basketball because he played basketball in high school. And he started for Northwestern most of that season. And Northwestern isn't the biggest powerhouse in college basketball. But it's a Big Ten school, so it was impressive that he went and transferred there and played there, for a whole season.
Yeah, you don't see it a lot, but sometimes you'll get the occasional player that'll transfer, uses eligibility year on something else. It's very unique, but it's still kind of considerably interesting. Just always to root for them, just give them, hey, go for it. What do you have to lose, right? So.
And Jimmy Graham, there's another one. He was a basketball player.
Yep, Antonio Gates, another one. Basketball, the football. You see that a lot, especially for tight ends. The basketball power forward or center just goes up and gets rebounds and blocks, and they get transitions to the tight end position for the NFL.
Tony Gonzalez played at California. He was
same thing.
Forgot about him. Yeah, there's been a bunch. Yeah.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you for coming on Final Whistle again. It's always a pleasure to have you on and chat it up. Glad we were able to get the technical difficulties out of the way so we can have this conversation. It was a blast. Thanks for always coming on. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, that's another edition of Final Whistle, everyone. Be ready for some interviews that will be taking place this week, as well as our traditional podcast episode on Friday. Enjoy your week, everyone. Have fun watching some college basketball.